Shalom everyone and welcome to our Kabbalah Level 1 course. This is the course that changed my life, and most of the people that I taught this course for the last almost 40 years, it changed their life for the good. This course is basically teaching us some basic ideas of Kabbalah that we, people who do not have an experience of studying deeply either Judaism or any books and texts in Kabbalah, we can still gain from that study and gain a lot, which means what is the purpose of the course? The purpose of the course is to teach us the way a Kabbalist thinks, deals with stuff, realize what things are about in their life. And when we use those tools, we're supposed to see change for the good, for the better in our lives, in the way we react to things, the way we understand things, and the most important, the way we experience reality. So, but few advices before we start. It will take you a lifetime to really internalize those concepts that we're going to learn. To internalize, to understand, you need to listen to the class. The classes are recorded. You can watch them again and again, listen again and again. Every time you listen, you realize there's so many things you didn't realize you were exposed to. You've been exposed to in the first time, not in the second, not in the third. There's so much information, and you're not supposed to understand everything at once. Many times you will feel like, what is that I heard? Our brain during the course is being upgraded, and it takes time till the brain starts to be rewired and function as I said, it's an upgrade for our brain. So it takes time, and we're not supposed to understand everything in the beginning. The more we study, the more we apply, the more we think about what we study, the more we are capable of internalizing it and applying it. And then the understanding is a intrinsic part. This is not learning history. This is not learning algebra. It's not nothing to do with your intellectual abilities, because this study is connecting your IQ, which is intellectual quotients, with your EQ, your emotional quotients, and with your SQ, which is spiritual quotients, and heightens all of them together. And this is part of something that activates parts of in our brain that were never activated before. So we're working on all three levels during this course. And another advice is listen to the class, listen to the materials, try to apply them in everyday's life, try to use the concepts in your everyday life to see if really does that improve my life. And then you can take the concepts and put them into a drawer in your brain. This is something I got, and now I can apply. There are things that it will take you longer to apply. And if you don't know how to apply it, it means you don't really understand it. So leave it in the drawer that it is like, I heard it, I know about it, I'm not really living it. And by the way, that means that I don't believe in it. When you say in English, I believe, it means I'm not so sure about it. I assume, but I have no idea if it's the real or not. Don't believe in what I say. Don't believe in what I teach, because that's not the way you live your life. You live a life from knowing. How do you know? You understand, you apply, you see that it's working. Now it's not a belief, it's knowledge. And that's why Kabbalah for many millennia was called the knowledge, the inner knowledge of the Torah. So let us start and with before that with one more advice. Sometimes you will hear stuff that really excites you. I'm warning you, don't try to teach that to others because you don't know how to teach that. And that means they can think that you're out of your mind. I know a lot of people that didn't listen to me and lost friends, family, that don't want to talk to them anymore. It will take you a while, not because it's a secret. It will take you a long time till you are able to explain those concepts to other people. You can, there's a lot of information on the site, livekabbalah.org. The first classes are summarized on the site. In the first page, you can have access to learning Kabbalah, and you have summaries of the first classes. So you can ask them to read. Don't try to explain because it's very hard to explain it without, you don't know how to explain it. It will take you a while. Okay, any question before we start? Okay, so background, let me introduce myself to ones people don't know. My name is Shaul Youdkevitch. I started to learn Kabbalah over 40 years ago. Matter of fact, it's 43 years ago. I was at that time a scientist. Kabbalah for me was just curiosity, but as I was learning, I realized this is not curiosity. I'm learning something bigger than life. I'm learning something, a body of wisdom that allows me to put together the materials I know from science and understand them much better. It can give me tools to understand all the study. I was born and raised in Israel. So, and in Israel, in elementary school, you study the Tanakh, the Bible. And a lot of stuff is not really understood. And it put it together for me also. So, and also with myself about my own identity, gave me amazing tools to understand my identity as a human being, my calling. So this is a real powerful event in my life. And as I'm telling my students, your life is going now to be divided BC, BK, before Kabbalah, and AK after Kabbalah. So whoever doesn't believe me, just try it, and we'll talk about it in the 10th class to see if it really worked for you. So let us just start. Okay, in order to understand first of all, what does it mean Kabbalah? We have to understand a concept in Judaism that is called Pardes. Pardes is initials of 4 letters. It sounds Pardes, but you see the uppercase PRDS. These are the initials of the 4 concepts that we need to know before we study Kabbalah. What are these 4 concepts? It's about our perception of reality. The first layer of perception of reality for every human being is called Pshat, which means simple. You look at something and you think what you see is what you get. This is a tree. This is a plant. This is a stone. This is a cloud. This is the sky, and this is the ground. Okay? It's very simple. Every child can understand. This is a simple. The point is that life is not what it looks like. Life has many layers of understanding. When you meet a person and you ask yourself, how long would it take me to know that person? Some people say, I can tell who's the person within few seconds. This is pshat. This is just the outer layer. This is the most shallow way of perceiving reality. When you look at the person the first time, when you meet that person, you don't really know the person. You don't really know the insides of the person. You didn't really know how do they behave in certain situations. This is very simplistic and also pshat, according to the Zohar. It's the same letters in Hebrew as tipesh. Tipesh means a fool. Only a fool jumps to conclusions and thinks that the way I see it, it takes a few seconds, I already know what's it all about. This is pshat. That layer of reality is very superficial, which is another understanding of the word pshat. And of course, you cannot really make decisions based on pshat, simplistic, superficial perception. So how do you make a decision? You meet the person, and that person wants to be your partner in life. Could be partner in life married to that person, or being partners in a company you build together, right? How do you know who's the person? So our sages teach us, if you really want to know who's the person, there are three ways to know who's the person. It's called the three cups. In Hebrew, koso, kiso, kaso. Koso, his cup, which means sit with them, take them to the bar or something like this, give them to drink together, give him more drinks and more drinks. When they get drunk, the wine, in Hebrew, you say, the wine comes in and the secret comes out. So that's one way to get stuff that the person will never reveal to you, just sitting and talking to you. Just getting them drunk and see what comes out. Another way, we said koso, his cup, kiso, his pocket, which means money. Ask him for money. You see that when people can be the nicest people, you ask them for money, they become another human being. It could be like very generous or very whatever. It's like, that's another way you test the person. Kaso, get him upset. See what happens to the person when they get upset. You will discover another world. So what did you do right now? You're looking for hints, more information about what's hiding behind the superficial layer of reality that you see with the physical eyes. That level is called remez, which means in Hebrew, the hint. You're looking for hints about what is the real personality of that human being that could be a very important human being in your life. Okay, the remez is in the Jewish body of wisdom is usually many, many legends that do not have any logical informative value. They just give you a hint about something that is beyond your first perception. For instance, a lot of people read Genesis chapter 1 and 2 about the creation, and there's a story of the Garden of Eden. So whoever studied in a Sunday school or something like this, or Hebrew school, or any way of studying the Bible, biblical studies, if you're being a child, so it's a children's book, and you see the Garden of Eden, you see Adam and Eve as naked people behind a bush, usually because they're naked, it's a children's book. And you see the snake hanging from a tree above, and you see an apple somewhere, okay? There are legends in Judaism talking about the Garden of Eden, and one of them says that Adam was very tall. How tall was he? Up to the sky. How tall is that? Did anyone measure tall up to the sky? And there's another legend that says that Adam was his body was illuminating. So much light came out of Adam's body that the light that came from his heel, that is the lowest part of the human body and the densest, the light that came from Adam's heel only was stronger than the light of the sun. So you think about it and you say, just a second, if you just learn to read hints Remez. What was growing in the Garden of Eden? Oh yeah, there were two trees, tree of life, tree of knowledge. Do we know any nursery you can buy plants of the tree of knowledge or the tree of life? No, because tree of life and tree of knowledge are spiritual concepts, which means there are no physical trees like this. The same way, there's no one tall up to the sky, and there's no one that only his heel is shining stronger than the sun. So what was the Garden of Eden? Was that a physical place like we can perceive with our senses? No, it was not. So you see, the remez means hints about the story that superficially you thought you know the story. But then you realize, yeah, the last time I heard the story, or the first time I heard the story, maybe I was 5 years old or 6 years old, maybe 8. And I never thought about it again. So the same way I got it when I was 8 years old, I'm still thinking about it today. No, the hints are telling you that was pshat, superficial. The remez is leading you that, well, there was something much deeper in that story that is called the Garden of Eden. And by the way, did you ever hear about a talking snake? I don't think so. So we're talking about another reality, and the whole Garden of Eden story is a parable more than just informative story about facts that happened who knows how long ago. So that is remez. Drash is the third level, is when you start taking all the facts that you know from the pshat, from the remez, and also from your study. You just simply accumulate more and more knowledge in order to understand what you're dealing with. Who's the person? What to expect from that person. But you know what? You can live with the person for decades. Could be like you think you know the person, and then you have certain moments that you say, I don't really know that person. And then sometimes the person passes on and people come and tell you stories, says, I didn't know the person. So the fourth layer is called Sod, secret, which basically talks about how the story is really based on. What is it made of? What is the layer of the real story, that the pshat is just the outer garment that disguises the whole story? It's like you're looking right now on a screen, okay? Does the screen has something of what's going on in the kishkas of your computer or smartphone? No, not at all. It doesn't even look alike even a little bit to all the codes running right now through your device, right? You have no idea. What you see is only the superficial layer that is covering huge amount of information that is running under the code, that is running under the screen. And that's the world we live in. We live in a world that basically we have very little understanding of how this world is structured, what motivates people, why things happen. Lots of people asked along history, either in theology or in science, or just children asking their parents, why? How is it working? How do we learn how to succeed in life? Unless you really delve into all 4 layers, pardes, only then you can really understand reality, figure it out, and know what to expect and what to do in order to get what you want to get. That is the 4 layers of perception. So now if we're going into understanding Kabbalah, we have to understand that Kabbalah, as we're going to explain soon, is a spiritual body of knowledge. It is related to what we call Sod, while the Bible itself, the Torah, the Tanakh, all the books, the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, they are telling us what is called pshat. There are many, there's oral teachings passed by the generations, legends and stories and information and so on. They belong also to the pshat, remez, or drash. Kabbalah is a body of wisdom, body of knowledge that is related to the sod, which means when we are exposed to Kabbalah, we are basically exposed to the idea that is behind all the different layers of information, that these layers of information are millennia old, but very few people really understood what they stand for, what they mean, and what they're trying to achieve unless you study Kabbalah. So basically, the study of Kabbalah is understanding the universe, the way it's structured, the purpose. It's not superficial, it's the real story, the real code. Okay? Anyone has a question? And that means because we humans, we are part of this creation, we are part of this world. As long as the Kabbalists said, as long as we do not understand Kabbalah, we will never really understand the purpose of life, the structure of life, the cause and effects in life. So that is the purpose of this course, to give us some basic tools, because Kabbalah is a huge body of knowledge. Thousands of books were written, a long history, that are connected to Kabbalah, that are presenting the wisdom of Kabbalah from so many different aspects. We're not going to understand all of these books, but what we're going to study today is going to give us the tools in which we can start the study, because the original language, the base language, that's what we are going to achieve during this course. So let us start from the beginning to see a little bit, because this course is not going to cover history, only this part of the course right now, this class, just that we know the context. Kabbalah really starts with Abraham the Patriarch. Abraham the Patriarch is very famous. How do we know? I don't think there are too many people around the world that do not know somehow about Abraham. And think about it. We're talking about the way we understand Abraham, most of us, is like an old man that had conversations with God some 4,000 years ago. Just think about it, that 4,000 years later, he is still a celebrity, although there's no PR company investing fortune in making him a celebrity, not over TikTok or Facebook or any other social media, or not even in other medias. So we're talking about somebody who's really a superpower. We're talking about the worth of the concept that is Abraham. So what was Abraham? Now it's time we study Kabbalah. So the concept we have about Abraham, we have to revive that concept, because thinking 4,000 years later, and he's still a celebrity, what was he? Who was he? So what do we know, according to Kabbalah, about Abraham? First of all, he was the first Kabbalist in history, which means the first person in human history that really had the picture, the ability to get what this world is about. He laid the basics of that philosophy, that body of wisdom that till today is changing the way we think and the way we perceive reality. So first of all, Abraham was a Kabbalist. What was he known for at that time? We have to understand that historically, Abraham was born and raised in a city called Ur. Ur Kasdim. Ur is today a place in the south of Iraq of today. That time, that area was called Sumer, ancient Sumer. He spoke Sumerian, and they used the cuneiforms to write. And what happened was that during what we know in history, we know in Jewish history that Abraham was an astrologer and an astronomer, maybe the greatest. He was, at that time, astronomy and astrology, the way we know it, especially astronomy, the foundations have been set in Sumer, in the time of Abraham, and probably Abraham was part of that generation, of that great important part of human knowledge and wisdom and science. Abraham left us, according to Jewish tradition, a book that is called the Book of Formation, or in Hebrew, Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah, in Jewish tradition, was passed down orally, one generation after generation, and it was written the first time around the 1st century CE, some 2,000 years ago. That's what the Academy is saying, that was written. When you read the book, it's written like a riddle in Hebrew, but it speaks about the structure of the universe. Today, with today's modern physics, it's much easier to understand the Book of Formation, because the Book of Formation is talking about mathematical structures and dimensions that are known to science only since 1984, which is not a long time. It's even not 40 years. 30, not even 40 years. Those concepts appear in the Book of Formation that is related to, in Jewish tradition, to Abraham. So what was Abraham, basically? We know him as the father of monotheism. And monotheism means love and kindness. What does that mean? So first of all, let us try to understand, because we live in an era in which we're trying to make every narrative and every belief system, if people believe it, it must be okay. And Abraham brought us the idea that, no, it's not really okay. And I'll explain why. Because that's very instrumental today when we are in a world war. It's like all over world war about our identity. You can look around and there's a huge chaos politically, economically, anything, you just name it. Wherever you go, family life, financial life, everything is chaotic right now. It's painful how chaotic it is. And it's all coming to one issue, which is identity. And let me explain. Because Abraham created something very important. He created the foundations of what we call is the modern concepts of modernism, humanism, whatever developed civilization today is proud of. And the base for it was laid only by Abraham 4,000 years ago. Most people think they're monotheists, still didn't get it, and I explain why. So let me try to explain first what is idol worshipping or polytheism. Now, in the ancient polytheistic world, if we're talking about polytheistic Mesopotamia or Canaan or Egypt, the Nordic polytheism, or the Greek or the Roman or just the Far East, there's one thing in common among all those ancient deities. They were not nice. Most of them are very passionate, selfish. They don't care about consequences. They don't have to pay any consequences. They see something, they take it. And the message is that mortals should not expect anything because they don't deserve anything. They are the deities. They take everything. They're the winners, and the winners take it all. And remember one more thing. The rulers in these ancient civilizations declare themselves as deities, as gods, which means if the gods are selfish and they take whatever they want from mortals, the rulers, the kings, and their elite surrounding, they are allowed to take whatever you have. If it's your money, if it's your daughters, your spouse, your freedom, your assets, your land, your home, whatever you created. Don't wonder why in today's life people are very productive, because when you know that any minute, if you're going to be too successful and too creative, the gods will be jealous of you and will take what you've got. Read all over all of these like mythologies, the stories of every ancient civilization. It's a very, if you follow that from a psychological point of view, the message was very clear. Don't try to excel, because you're going to draw the attention of the gods, and they are going to be upset about you because you're trying to be like them, and they're going to be envious, and they're going to take it away from you. Which means, what's the message? You lay low. If you lay low enough and you be in submission, maybe they won't notice you, and you will have, you know, a life that has less evil as possible. Maybe you can get by. That's a very dire picture of ancient civilizations, which means there was no hope for anything. You just hope that they won't touch you. People brought sacrifices. What does it mean, sacrifices? People sacrifice their children. Just take whatever is dear to me and leave me alone. It was the concept of sacrificing. Living in a reality like this is very totalitarian, very dire, very dark, very hopeless. Abraham, the legends are saying that he looked at the stars and he realized there's one power running everything. So the difference between polytheism and monotheism is when Abraham realizes, yes, there are different forces in this world. There's gravity. You know, if you're an astronomer, you have to admire gravity, because it's so complex and so organized. Okay, but still, there's one force running all of that, forces of gravity, destiny, human life, everything. And when Abraham got that concept and he realized that there's one God and there's nothing but God, his whole life changed till today, our lives. Because if there's only one God and there's nothing but God, that's what monotheism means. There's only one. It's the whole world is one. That means that every human being, every creature, every plant, every piece of this universe is part of that one God. And therefore, you have to respect every part of the creation, because that's part of God. And that's endless. And that means you cannot steal, even though you declare yourself as a king. You're not above the law. You understand that Abraham was a threat, and therefore they tried to kill him, the king of his city. These are the legends in the Jewish tradition. And finally, Abraham, he couldn't kill him, so Abraham had to go on a journey. And in an age, most people retire after a huge career that he did. And if he was the greatest astrologer, all the celebrities, everybody, all the people with power were coming probably to Abraham to ask for an advice. And now that great person, that very famous person says, you're living a lie. And the lie is that every human being, if he's part of God, he's entitled for happiness. He was created to be happy. And no one has the right to rob a human being for his right for happiness. So you have to understand that that means something very important. Abraham is the father of the ideas of modern enlightened society: equality, free will, individual control, and everyone's right for happiness, which is, we think, that that's a result of just the last few centuries of human philosophy and thinking. But all of these ideas are rooted with Abraham, in the Abrahamic faiths, the basic rule, the basic foundation, which means the more we connect to true monotheism, the more we learn that basically we have total responsibility for our own happiness, and we have no right whatsoever to impose anything, good or evil, on anyone else. Because if a human being was created in the image of God, no one can be my God, nobody can be your God, because we are all part of that endless one God. So, of course, that the human being cannot force himself and his ideas, his narrative on anyone else. And whoever is trying to force his on mine, we're in trouble. So this is the foundation of modern society. We're not talking just about something 4,000 years ago. Now, somebody who really got it was Thomas Cahill. He wrote this best-selling book. It was a bestseller book in the 90s. And he called the book The Gifts of the Jews. Thomas Cahill was Irish Catholic, by the way. He made a research about the background of Abraham. In the archaeological excavations of the city of Abraham, they found a library. So Cahill read the whole library, and he was shocked, because in the ancient Mesopotamian languages, they didn't have past and future in their language, which means they never believed that anything was ever different, anything will ever be different. Things were, are, and will always be the same. And that's very hard, because what he said, the name of his book was How a Tribe of Desert Nomads, because that's how we call Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And later on, 40 years in the deserts of those children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, after they were enslaved in Egypt, and they are desert nomads for 40 years, they changed the way everyone thinks and feels. And what did he say, basically? Is that if you read the ancient texts, they did not have words like transformation, change, hope. All of these are concepts that Abraham brought to the world, and then the Israelites brought them to the world, and then the world started to learn how to think and talk with this language. So when we speak about hope, about transformation, about change, about fighting for your rights and stuff like this, these are words that did not exist in the ancient languages. And that's what's so important. When we understand the original language of Abraham, we can connect better to ourselves, and we can connect to our real deep identity. The identity of someone who always strives to grow. Let me explain it even more. When we say that the human being was created in the image of God, what does that mean? And I can explain that, what does it mean if somebody is the image of God? If you are in the image of God, it cannot be physical image, right? Because God is infinite. If there's one God, he has no physical shape, and a shape and a form are being created when you have definitions. And definition come from finite, and God is infinite. So we have a problem over here, correct? So we cannot say that God has a physical image. We're talking just about a mental image. And for many years of teaching, there are three concepts that we have to understand that we can understand, it's the easiest to understand, about what does it mean to be a creator. The first concept out of the three is independence. God will never be affected by anyone, by anything, because otherwise he's not God. Okay? We, his creatures, we have that tendency of looking for independence, and we hate any dependency. We hate it when we are unhappy or our happiness is dependent of any other people or anything. We are very, very uncomfortable when our happiness is dependent on materials, conditions. Only people that can be happy unconditionally can really be happy. What does it mean? Being an addict. You can be addicted to what people say. You can be addicted to shopping. You can be addicted to the internet. You can be addicted to drugs, all kinds of other materials. What's wrong with addiction? You're not independent. You're not connected to your own inner identity of striving to be in the image of God. So happiness is something that you have to create on your own. That's a very important part of modern aspects of human freedom. To have the freedom of expressing yourself and reaching your own happiness the way you understand. That's very much into the Abrahamic belief system. What else? So we said the first concept is independence. The second is creativity. If you are the creator, look at the universe. What a magical piece of work. So people are at their best when they are creative. When you suppress people from creating, that's the beginning of the end. When a person does not feel like he can create his own life, that's a terrible news. And it's very hard to find happy, lazy people. The happy people most people know are people who are very creative, very busy being creative. So the freedom to create is part of being or carrying this image of the creator. And the third one is giving. The creator is giving. Look, all of this world he gave us. We are the most happy when we give. And that's why you can never find happy, selfish people. People are always busy, being narcissistic, always thinking about their own good, their own opinions, and how they can take, and not about how they can give. They can never be happy. And the happiest people on earth are the people that are giving, caring, creatively, and they are not busy caring what other people say about it. We appreciate, we don't appreciate. No, I'm giving because just think about it. So basically, this is the origin of monotheism. And the more we connect to our real true identity, the more happy we can become. And basically, studying Kabbalah is what are the means, what are the tools, and how do we exercise becoming those kind of people that really connect to their own true, real inner identity. We can see that about Abraham when you read Genesis 25:8. ויגבע וימות אברהם בשיבה טובה, זקן ושבע, ויאסף אל עמיו. Abraham gave up his spirit and died in a good old age, an old man, and satiated. Just think about it. How many people feel satiated? How many people can look backwards and say, wow, what an interesting life, and I'm so full, and I'm so complete, and I'm fulfilled. That means your life is successful. And was gathered to his people, which means we are talking about when Abram comes to the end of his days, And he's satiated. It's like, guys, it was amazing. Bye. It's time to say goodbye. I have other things to do. You know, if the end is well, all is well. And that is a very important perception. You know, how do you know you are successful? You're satiated. So 500 years later, it's the first time that concept is being given to a community. Remember, Abraham was alone. Isaac was alone. Jacob was alone. Oh yeah, he had a family of 70 people, the end of his days. Still, that's being alone. The first time we're talking about giving these concepts to a whole nation, we're talking about Moses. Moses received, by Jewish tradition, both the written Torah and the oral law on Mount Sinai, and the oral Torah includes also Kabbalah, which means mainstream Judaism for thousands of years cannot see a difference between the Torah, the Talmud, and Kabbalah. The only difference is the arguments about who should study that, what age, in what condition, and so on. But there's no argument till today, only in the fringes, if Kabbalah is part of the Torah given on Mount Sinai or not. There's no argument. You know, I remember once there was a great rabbi. He was supposed to be elected to the High Court of Rabbinical Court in Jerusalem, but there were some rumors that he does not believe in Kabbalah. He had to write a document stating that he sees Kabbalah and all the books of Kabbalah as intrinsic part of the Torah given on Mount Sinai. Otherwise, he could not get the position in the High Court, in the Rabbinical Court in Jerusalem. So that was just like a few decades ago. So remember, there's some people who have no idea. They say, "Oh, Kabbalah is something else. Kabbalah is a stream in Judaism. It's not part really of Judaism." Whoever speaks like this, either they lie or they're ignorant. So yeah, in the mainstream Judaism for thousands of years, all the teachings of Kabbalah are basically part of the main body. It's only the only idea is who can study that and what part of it and in what conditions. So now we skip from Moses, some 14, 15 centuries later. For all of these generations, the wisdom of Kabbalah, like all Jewish wisdom, except from the written law, the written books, which are the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, all the rest, all the commentaries were oral teachings. There was a reason why, because as long as it's oral, it's alive. And if you read the Talmud or the Zohar, it's always debates. Debates, debates, debates. What is the real truth? When you have few people standing around a statue, each one of them will describe a different picture of that statue because he's standing and seeing from a different angle. What's the truth? All 360 degrees vision. And no one, not even one, has all 360. So we have to understand that human beings have different perception of reality. And the moment that's my perception, it cannot be the truth because I am different. And I can see, and not just this, I think that each one of us knows that in different stages in our life, we see things differently. Okay? So do we really see the truth? It says in the Zohar, the major book of Kabbalah, that on Mount Sinai, there were 600,000 people. Everybody heard the law. Everybody heard and received and connected to the whole 4 layers, Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Dash, and Sod, of the whole wisdom. And each one of them, says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Each one of them saw it differently. And that's why you can find in the Mishnah and then in the Talmud and so on, in every aspect of Jewish law, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. You see two schools arguing. One says dark, one says it's night, it's day. And both are living words of God. Why? You have to understand the different schools of thought, different people, see reality from different aspects, from different angles. That's why you need always to brainstorm. And that's why, as for centuries, it was only brainstorming. Then around the 2nd century CE, just after the destruction of the second temple in Jerusalem, while the great sages of that time realized that we are coming into an age, they call it the dark millennium, we call it the dark ages, in which people of wisdom are going to be persecuted, libraries are going to be burned, and wisdom is going to be so scarce and so rare. And they had to write it down. So the people who lived at that generation, we're talking about the 2 centuries following the destruction of the second temple in Jerusalem, they were called Tanaim. Single Tana, plural Tanaim. Those people tried to write down all the oral wisdom down before it's being forgotten, but they knew it's a problem. So they wrote it in many layers. And one layer is the Mishnah, and later on that Mishnah was expanded 400 years later into what we know as the Gemara, together the Talmud, which is more interpretations. But the same people wrote also another text, which is called the Zohar. The main author, the one who founded that book, is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in the 2nd century CE in the Galilee, and he was the main author of the Zohar. He was not the only. Like the Talmud, there were many sages that together, but he basically ran the show. He was responsible for some of the main parts of the Zohar. Rabbi Shimon, he's the one who said that there were 600,000 people on Mount Sinai. Each one of them heard the Torah, and each one of them heard something else, and each one of them is right. Now we understand what brainstorming is about. Is when you give value to every one point of view, and you realize that you listen to somebody else, not because if he's right, you're wrong. No, if he's right, together you can merge your point of view with his point of view. Together you had something that has more dimensions and something that is closer to the truth. If you don't think the same exactly, it's not negating, but it's completing each other. That's an idea behind brainstorming. And we know that societies that have free brainstorming and free flow of ideas and arguments all the time, they are more viable and they have better chances to survive great challenges, either societies or companies. Well, societies and companies that have only one way of thinking, the boss, the king, the dictator comes from to dictate. The one who dictates the thoughts, they have less ability to produce and to withstand challenges. So if you want to be a very successful human being, you must listen to other people's ideas and to be tolerant to their points of view, realizing you don't see only one. One thing that we know about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that when something about just to get the person that with his great wisdom and his connection, that he studied 13 years in a cave when the Romans tried to kill him, and he hid in a cave for 13 years with his son, Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Eliezer. So in these 13 years, it says that every day Elijah the prophet and Moses came to teach them the original secrets of Kabbalah, and that's the major parts of the Zohar. One of the most amazing stories is that when it says that on the day that Rabbi Shimon decided to leave this world, he gathered his main students. There were 5 of them, including and in addition to his son. And he said, today is the day that I'm leaving, and today we're going to study. But usually when we came together, everybody spoke and everybody added something to the learning. But today I cannot live in shame, because today I'm leaving this world. And therefore, I'm going to speak, because the greatest wisdom, the most important, I need to give you before I leave. And he dictates a small part of the Zohar, but a very important one, that speaks about the creation, the world before the Big Bang, amazing stuff, and the evolutionary process, and how the universe was formed and how it became like the universe we know today. And Rabbi Abba, who's the one who wrote down the words of Rabbi Shimon, says, all day long, Rabbi Shimon spoke, and because of the holiness, there was so much energy, so much power, so intense. The fire filled up the room and surrounded the whole house. No one could get even close to the house. That's why, by the way, even today, it's almost 2,000 years later, on that day that Rabbi Shimon passed away and taught us his last chapter of the Zohar, there's a tradition to light fires outside, big bonfires, and that's called Lag BaOmer. And most people don't know, when they light those fires, this is a memory of the fire that surrounded the house of Rabbi Shimon when he gave that most important part of the Zohar. So this is one of the biggest celebration, by the way, in Israel, once a year, on the day of departure of Rabbi Shimon. And again, Rabbi Shimon is a celebrity, because hundreds of thousands of people celebrate that every year. And more people celebrate it every year than the year before. So we're talking about something that is very powerful. And then Rabbi Abba says, Rabbi Shimon was dictating, and then he dictated, Orech Yamim Ushnot Chaim, long life and years of real life. And then Rabbi Abba says, I was writing down and I thought to write more, but the words of Rabbi Shimon stopped. He didn't speak anymore. I could not raise my eyes from the paper because the room was full with so much light. I could not raise my eyes. Only a long time later, the fire somehow was not that strong, and I could raise my eyes and I saw Rabbi Shimon lying on his side in his bed. He was not alive, but his face was laughing. And what a way to leave this world. And that's, if you live like this, you live like this. The Zohar there was a decree that the Zohar would not be revealed till 1,000 years later. There was a fear because the Zohar was really explaining in between the lines of the Torah, the Mishnah, and the Talmud. Only 1,000 years later, the Zohar was discovered by Rabbi Moshe de Leon. We don't know. We just know that his wife published it. And could have been, some Kabbalists are saying, that was not the time and he didn't have time to tell her not to publish it. She needed the money, she published the manuscript. Within a very short time, the Zohar was everywhere in the Jewish world. We're talking about 13th century. But only the greatest minds could have access to the Zohar and understand what the Zohar is speaking about. The Zohar is written as a code. The first time the Zohar was printed was in Mantua, Italy, 1558. That's the first page. The moment a book is printed, it means it's not a secret anymore. Very simple. The moment a book is printed, it's not a secret, because you can't just send a policeman to stand with every volume in every bookstore to make sure that only the right people will buy the book, which means that that was around the time, 16th century, in which a new era in the history of humanity started. According to the Kabbalists, it was 1490, that from that time on, the Zohar was allowed to read, not just allowed, everyone was supposed to study the Zohar, because the world started into a new era. Today, we call it, modern times, the end of the Dark Ages, but they predicted that the new era will come, the era of information, and without knowing the Zohar, we will be lost, because there will be a flood of knowledge in the world, and without the Zohar, without Kabbalah, we'll have a problem to get it into order. So we're just finishing the history part. Let's skip a few more years. We're just in the 16th century, the time the Zohar was printed. So, and we're coming to the golden era of Kabbalah. We're talking about the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria. It's called the Lurianic Kabbalah. Rabbi Isaac Luria, which is called the Ari, or the Arizal, he was born in Jerusalem in 1534. When he was 8, his father passed away. His mother could not support them, so they were invited to his uncle's home in Cairo. He grew up in Cairo, was educated over there. He found the Zohar over there, and the chief rabbi of Cairo, the Radbaz, was his Kabbalah teacher. Then he moved to Tzfat, in Hebrew, and he passes on in 1572 in Tzfat. At that time, was the greatest Jewish community in the world was in Tzfat. We're talking about the 16th century. Some of the greatest minds of the Jewish world came to Tzfat, and basically they recreated Judaism the way we know it, and also the main books of Kabbalah that basically took the wisdom of the Zohar and other books that were written before, and Rabbi Isaac Luria brought it together into a much more organized body of wisdom that you can see, the study of the creation of the universe. It's like, we're going to talk about it during the course. Those writings basically were not very much exact, like other Kabbalists before, but the idea was that there were different teachings or schools of teaching of Kabbalah before, but they fit their era. And now the new era, as we said, the new era after 1490 needed a new concept, a new school, and that school is called the Lurianic Kabbalah, Rabbi Isaac Luria, because his father's last name was Luria. He was from what is today Belarus. His mother was from Spain, and we said he was born in Jerusalem. There was a Jewish community in Jerusalem, and then a thriving Jewish community in Safed. The writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria were written by his student, Rabbi Chaim Vital. He was originally from Italy, from Calabria. And the writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the writings of the Ari, were the base of two great schools. One is the Sephardi Kabbalah, which means all the teachings of Kabbalists from Morocco all the way to India and Central Asia. And the other one is the Hasidic movement that came in, we're talking about 18th century in Eastern Europe. And also there was the Ashkenazi Kabbalah. All of them are based on the Lurianic Kabbalah. What I'm going to teach in the coming classes is based on the Lurianic Kabbalah, which is also the basics of, when you study those teachings, you will be able to access either Sephardic Kabbalah or Hasidic books, and understand them because these are the basics. Okay. Something weird happened at the end of the 19th century because Kabbalah was really alive in the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. By the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, it became like a dead language. It's like people who studied Kabbalah, they did not really study, they simply just learned books by heart. It was memorizing more than learning. Then comes a new figure, Rabbi Ashlag. We have to remember because he's the founder of what we call the modern Kabbalah movement. Most of the places that teach Kabbalah around the world today, most of the books translating the Zohar into a modern language, they have to be based on his work. Rabbi Ashlag did two great projects that nobody ever did before. To take the Zohar of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that is written in Aramaic, and to translate it to a language in a system that is consistent. It's thousands and thousands of pages. The Zohar is a huge book. Okay, that was Rabbi Ashlag. And at the same time, he also made a commentary, very consistent, of the writings of the books of the Rabbi Azakloria. Rabbi Ashlag's commentary to the Zohar in translation is called Hasulam, the ladder, because it's like a ladder. The ladder, Rabbi Ashlag says, it's like you have that attic full of treasures. You need a ladder to climb on to reach that attic. And the same thing is saying Kabbalah is the treasures, and my commentary will be the ladder a human being can climb on so he can reach the treasures of godly thinking. His commentary to the writings of Rabbi Zakloy is called Talmud Eser Sfirot, the study of the 10 illuminations, the 10 Sefirot. So these two basic, huge works are the base of the teachings that I'm going to bring you. He has some other writings, and I'm going to use that too in our course. Basically, Rabbi Ashlag declares, in certain terms, I found a great need to blow up an iron barrier that separates us from the wisdom of Kabbalah from the time of the destruction of the temple onwards, until this generation, which weighs us down to a very severe degree and arouses fear that, God forbid, will be forgotten among the people of Israel. That was basically the great goal of Rabbi Ashlag. Today, that you find all over the world people writing about Kabbalah, there are sites talking about Kabbalah, most of them are somehow inspired by the works of Rabbi Ashlag. There are many things in his teachings. Today, you can find that the tree of life is talking about is somehow reminding with his structure, as I said about Abraham in the book of Formation. We're talking about 21st century wisdom. The world is made of 10 dimensions and 12 particles. That's modern physics. And in Sefer Yetzirah, you have 20th century BCE, which is talking about 10 Sefirot and 12 signs of the zodiac and 12 original forces of the universe. And together with the Sefirot, it's 10, so it's 22. And that corresponds to 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This is a cosmology that is so intricate. Basically, the way we can say that Abraham and the Kabbalists that came after him, they are more like hackers to the matrix. And when you study Kabbalah, you learn how to enter the matrix, enter the network of the tree of life. And we start to bring in energy, knowledge, wisdom, perception. Your life is transformed. And basically, this is the purpose of the study of Kabbalah. So we can be connected to the tree of life and expand our unity with the tree of life. And by this, we correct the sin of Adam. Okay, so up to now, I'm not going to talk about history anymore, but we have to know the context between the study of Kabbalah and how it affected history and to our world. And from next week on, we're going to talk about how do we apply it? How do we apply connecting to the tree of life and becoming better people and more capable of pursuing our happiness and our freedom? Any questions?